Boom.
Yeah, don't necessarily have to. It'll just be about
okay,
editing out all of
Okay,
Pete's dropouts.
All right, good.
Good luck.
Okay, here we go. Can we hear that?
So jazzy.
Yep.
Is that good?
So classy.
Yeah. Let me turn it up a little bit.
Oh, could you turn it up a little bit? Oh my gosh, this is great.
There you go. Hello, and welcome to The Pouch versus Aussie English, the podcast equivalent to hoping that the toaster is hot enough to burn that little bit of mould off, that aims to take a not-so-serious look at the current events, both here and, well, here. I'm Greg. Well, working in front of the window seemed like a great idea at the time. Savage.
And I'm Jake, Pete in the Sandwich Far Warden. On today's episode, we're lucky enough to be speaking with none other than the man who invented the shaved head and notorious host of the Aussie English podcast, Mr. Pete Smissen. Pete, how are you? I would say, Pete, we've been missing Pete Smissen.
I feel like
How many times a day do you hear that? Yeah.
Really?
Shut up, Mr.
I thought it was
Smith.
original.
Shut up, Mr. Smith. It's not funny. You used that last week.
Don't you have one?
Upset. I thought that was original. I thought I'd just come up with. Anyway, how are you?
Man, I'm good. Every time they read my name off, oh, Pete Smissen. He's missing. He's not here. He's right. I'm here. Can't you see me? Yeah, I'm good. I'm chugging along well. What are you guys up to? You guys podcasting today?
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out how to turn that down so we can hear you.
Don't you just run it to the end of the music, or?
Yeah, but you know.
Yeah, we let it run out.
Infinite
just like
loop.
that.
Yeah, it's on an infinite loop. Well, yeah, I can play it again if you want.
Yeah, let's just do it through the whole show. We definitely won't get sick of it after 2 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, now I'm sick of it. I'm sick of it, Greg. Stop the music.
I don't know if I can. I think it just runs its course. No, Pete, you are the host of the Aussie English podcast. How is the podcast going? What's happening? I saw that you opened up subscriptions a little while ago and then shut them again.
Man, yeah. Well, that's the new business model that I'm trying out.
Exclusivity.
Yeah, well, that's it. Add a bit of exclusivity, make people take action. You know. Yeah,
Does
we're
it work?
about past. Yeah, works pretty well.
Nice. Okay. I was hoping for a funnier answer. No, I'm a
Yeah, that's it. I'm just like, no. Actually, it turns everyone away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we're about to pass episode 1,000. In fact, I think 999 was published today. So how insane is that? I think I'm past Jake now in terms of podcast episodes I've published.
Really? How many did you do for iFriends, Jake?
Yeah, about 500, 450 odd, I think. I don't know. Something like. No, it was like 470, I think we got to. Yeah. And then I lost interest.
Yeah, that's what happens, I guess. Well, look, we're at episode 82 or something, and I'm already pretty much there.
I'm going to start a new show. I'm going to do Australian Portuguese. That's my new show. Because I'm like, Australian English has been done. I'm just going to go to the next language.
Yeah. You should do it. There's a lot of Brazilians living in Australia.
No, I've lost interest. Sorry. I got sick of it. I got sick of the idea after saying it.
Yeah, fair enough. It was. It's a plot that doesn't go too far, isn't it? Hey? Anyway, now Pete's internet isn't 100% tonight, ladies and gentlemen. So we will be playing.
It's about 98%.
Yeah.
That's it.
Once it gets into
I'll
double
be replying
digits,
to all of these stories and lines and jokes 30 seconds late.
just laugh when you come back in.
That's
Just
it.
laugh.
Unfortunately, that was a very interesting reaction there, Pete. We just told you some very unfortunate news, and you followed it up with a joke, highly inappropriate. I just want to let everybody know that Pete's views do not equate to the views of this podcast. I do want to know, though, Greg. You were talking in the intro about burning mold off a piece of bread.
I was
toasted. Can I ask you? Are you immune to syphilis now that you've taken your daily shot of penicillin, or did it in fact burn the mold off?
There's only one way to find out.
Yeah, that's true. Let's get into it.
And I'm not ready to go down that path. So
I'm not ready for that type of commitment.
No, definitely not. Yep. No, look, I suppose it's more of just about that moment when you grab the bread and it is moldy, and you just think to yourself,
what do I
mean, I can boil water and make it. I can boil water and make it, good again. Get rid of all the parasites in there. Can I burn off the mold and make it,
100%. Just cut it off and put it in the toaster. We're away.
Yeah,
it's Vegemite time.
My bread is quite moldy. Like if I cut it all off, I wouldn't end up with any
Sourdough,
bread.
right?
Yeah.
Is that a euphemism, Greg? Or
All right. Now, Pete. I'm not in Victoria. You're in Victoria. I'm in New South Wales. Jake is in Queensland. So we're bridging the divide, right? We're bringing the federation back together. All right.
Yes. One podcast at a time.
One. Pete.
We'll wait 30 seconds.
Classic.
For the joke.
And so I thought we would bridge that divide tonight by bringing you in as well. You are in. I mean, do you have a total amount of days that Victoria's been in lockdown? Not just for this one, but in total.
probably 200 and something.
Yeah, 200. You've got to be up to like 240, 250 or something.
Yep. 2 full beards worth.
200 days in August. So, yeah.
Okay. I don't even know what year August was in.
Pretty brutal.
So, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, well, we're in
This
day
year.
75. So, happy days. Happy days. We do have a
How do you feel? How do you feel?
Look, it's been a roller coaster. Hey, it's such a bizarre feeling. But anyway, I don't want to get too much about the New South Wales stuff and specifically the Victoria. I want to try and keep this conversation around Australia, right? Let's try and, like I say, the aim of today is to try and bring the Federation together. If you do have a comment, you can leave it in the comments section of whatever social media platform you're listening on, and we will get a version of what you've written and be
Also,
able to
if
bring.
you don't have a comment, please leave that comment in the comment section that you have no comment. I feel it's really important to know whether you have a comment or not. If you do have a comment, obviously leave a comment. If you don't have a comment, please write no comment.
Absolutely, yeah,
That's
yeah,
it.
yeah.
The algorithm likes it.
Yeah.
Boost
Yeah.
engagement.
Oh, okay, sure. Why not? I was trying to be funny.
There's
You
an
made it
algorithm.
real.
I just say please.
Did you see what happened with Western Australia crushing it with a $5.6 billion surplus?
I did.
Taking names.
I did. He was
He
ready
was
for it, though.
laughing
He came out at his press conference and said, I'm ready for the backlash. I'm ready for the people to start, backlashing me with the $5.6 billion. But he said, as evidence, the plan is working. The plan for them to have increased GST is working. So, good on them. I don't know. Hopefully,
No, I think
the
this-
Western Australians benefit from it,
Yeah, I think they will. Their gold-plated hospitals and gold-plated roads have been going really. They've just been amazing. I did note recently that they had some issues with their gold-plated boats. Unfortunately, the gold is just a little bit too heavy. Can't achieve neutral buoyancy. Does sink, but I feel like they've learnt their lesson after sinking 6,000 boats.
It's typical of Jake to refer to floating as natural buoyancy. Yeah, look, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. I'm no economist, I don't know what exactly is going on there. I do know that the $5.6 billion at this stage, and him gloating about. I love the idea that there's this gold-plated road that just goes right up to the border and then just suddenly stops and then it's just desert.
Yep.
It's just
Well, that's I mean, it's red. It's definitely red. Yeah. Look, it's great. It's great for Western Australia. I mean, obviously, their one skill is being able to dig stuff up, which is great. Look, being able to do that really well has worked tremendously for them. I would caution them to, maybe don't rub it in so much because like for the first 150 years of federation, past federation, of course, or 100 years past federation. The rest of Australia, of course, the East Coast, we did kind of prop Western Australia up. That's kind of the only reason that they exist. It would be nice if they could maybe spread a little bit of love, around those states that aren't so, filled with billions.
yeah,
That'd
I
be
agree.
great.
Look, anything that can lead towards a pay rise for teachers, I'm there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We didn't say anything about teachers, Greg. Sorry.
They're always first on the list, of people.
It was about addressing mouldy toast.
All right. All right. Well, let's have a chat about that, right? So recently it was Father's Day, okay? And
was.
by
Happy
my
Father's Day, lads.
yeah, I was going to say by my
Hello.
calculations, all three of us are fathers, right? How do you feel about the politics of Father's Day?
Pete?
Because obviously we love our kids, that's a given, right? And the presents are great. Jake, you better go first.
Okay, well, look, in terms of the politics, I try not to get so political about Father's Day, being that I have a daughter and a stepdaughter, so Father's Day can be a little bit political in our household, but what I like to do with that politics is I like to shame the child that gets me the worst present. and it's worked like pretty well each year. They try to leapfrog each other. The first year the newborn got me a pretty bad present. It was a dirty nappy, and the second year, she leapfrogged the other child, and I got a better gift. So and they've been leapfrogging really
Clean
ever
nappy.
since.
Yeah,
It's great.
clean nappy.
Yeah, clean nappy.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's
They're the
great.
best.
And this year I got a worm farm, so I've come full circle. Yeah.
I suppose.
How about you, Pete?
Well, I suppose that's the thing, right? Like I'm trying to figure out what
T-shirt and a cake.
What,
Loving
do- what do I mean by like the politics of it? And I'm thinking about the fact that there's a sort of push to sort of you don't refer to a pregnant woman anymore. You refer to a person who is pregnant. So what does it mean?
Okay.
What does it mean to be a father? Like can you just say, well, Happy Father's Day? You sort of have to think about all the father figures. You have to think about what does that even mean? And if gender is a social construct, what does that mean? In terms of identifying as a father. Do you have to say happy day of people who identify as fathers, sort of thing. Like I'm not going down that path. I'm sort of taking the mickey a little bit, but it's like, well, it's complicated.
Hope no one goes down that path.
No, but it's complicated, right? Like it's.
Well, I think whoever it is, any of these other groups just need to contact their local card manufacturers and ask for their own day, right? That's the only reason that Father's Day and Mother's Day exist. It's just
have a non-binary masculine figure day.
But don't you think it's not like? I think it's not like. I think days specifically for things are actually quite nice. I'm not pro week. I don't think you need a week for anything. I think a day is pretty good. Like I figure we could come up with probably.
What about Shark Week?
That's it. It's always Shark Week, isn't that like constantly?
That's right.
Or Black History Month. They're always like,
No,
why do we get a month? Why isn't it 2 months? Why isn't it 3 weeks?
That's right. So let's just stick with a day, right? And I think that Father's Day. How can you condense
Father's
it
into
Day,
just a month?
Mother's Day, birthdays, all those sorts of things. Like a chance to sort of go, hang on, like fathers are important, mothers are important, and what they do for families is really important, and it's good to have a day of appreciation. So it's nice that we have those days. I'm not anti-day. I suppose it's just where does it end? Why isn't
I'm not used to it. To be honest, it's pretty weird. It's been weird the last 2 years now that I've actually got to celebrate Father's Day because, as a white Caucasian male, a straight male, I'm not used to having much celebration aimed at me except on my birthday.
Yeah. Well, that's right. Yeah,
And
birthdays
every other
are pretty
day.
much it. Yeah.
Well, that's it.
Yeah, but look,
That would be the retort. It'd be like every day's a celebration, bitch.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, we are G-rated now.
We are
well, we used to be anyway.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. We are G-rated for the most part, and Greg rated. So,
Hey,
as he does, right? Every holiday comes around, and as he does, Scott Morrison tends to do something that ticks everybody off, right? Whether it's Christmas time and he ducks off to Hawaii for a bit of a holiday. I'm sure he did something at Easter time to tick everyone off. Father's Day, not a holiday, but anyway, Father's Day. He's had to defend his $4,000 trip to Sydney on Father's Day weekend. The Sydney Morning Herald reports that Prime Minister Scott Morrison will continue flying between Sydney and Canberra under exemptions from health rules that restrict movement, arguing the government still needs to function and he must be able to cross the border to do his job. Hours after Labor accused him of appalling judgment for making a flying visit to Sydney to see his family on Father's Day, the Prime Minister said he was no different from other essential workers in needing to move between cities. Now, the crux of this, as I'm sure you guys know, is that on that Father's Day on his Facebook, he posted an old photo of him with his family. And tastelessly, that photo was taken to remember some the families that had been destroyed by I think, was it the car crash one?
Yeah, there was a car crash, and it was at a memorial for the family members who passed away. Yeah,
right. Yeah. So it was him releasing the doves with his family from a year ago. So there was this sense of, well, he knew that that something was up with what he was doing, so this was a sort of a distraction. But again, nothing to worry about. Like, we have a segment in our show, Pete, which is just nothing to worry about, and it's the politicians just basically saying, look, we know you've heard about this particular scandal, but nothing to worry about. I don't know. What do you guys think? Is this just media stuff? Do we just get sucked into this? Is it important? Is it important that we know about this? Is it important that we bust him for his lies? What do you guys think?
I was pulling my hair out, but yeah,
It worked.
I'm
It clearly
yeah,
worked.
exactly. I had a lot to pull out. I'm just over it. I'm over how clueless he seems to be. You know, he's meant to be a marketer, and you would think he seems to be so switched on and conniving in some aspects of his career and work, and yet has seems to have no idea sometimes with
Hmm.
certain judgments. You would imagine that even a Machiavellian evil narcissist would have some sort of an idea of this is probably not going to look good if I do this. Going to Hawaii during the bushfires for Christmas is
Mm,
probably a bad idea, and I'm
Mm.
not going to be able to do this and fly under the radar. So I just
mm.
don't know how he just doesn't think of these things ahead of time. You
I
sort
think he
of
did
like,
though. I think he absolutely did think about this ahead of time, and I think that's
mm,
why he posted the photo that he did. You know, I think that's why there was so much secrecy around this. He clearly recognized that this was pretty poor judgment. On the flip side of that, the prime minister has spent a tremendous amount of time away from his family. Every time he goes overseas, he has to quarantine away from his family for 2 weeks. In addition,
but I
whatever
think
time he spends
again, Jake,
overseas.
it's like cry me a river. If you don't want the job, if it's too hot in the kitchen, get out of the kitchen, right?
Yes.
You can't
Get in
sort of be
there.
like, it's so hard on my $400,000 wage,
No, but I mean,
flying around and
it's
having all
one of
this
those things.
responsibility.
In context, in context, he is someone who potentially deserves some time with his family. Like I think we all deserve time with our family. It's
Yeah.
not necessarily that is the issue. I think the issue is this is a secret trip that I'm making. I'm not going to tell anybody about it. And
Yeah.
when it was found out, when he snuck back into Canberra the next day, it made national headlines.
Hmm.
Particularly at the same time, you've got Peter Dutton, who was criticising the Queensland Premier around the families that were having to hug through perspex glass at the Tweed between New South Wales and Queensland
No
because of
trivial
family
matter.
separated.
Mm.
It's one of those things. You can't on one hand have your senior government ministers criticizing people for keeping people apart and then ensure that you yourself, like the head of that
Hmm.
organization, the head of that political party, has just foregone that and just skip the area.
Well, I think that's the thing. It's just tone deaf, right? You would imagine. I think the most respected leaders in the world tend to be those that suffer with their people and
Mm.
don't say fly away in a helicopter as the city is being entered by the enemy. So
Yeah.
as we'll get to later, but
To me, it's kind of
it's
Oh,
it's
there's
just.
literally that story. Wow.
it's
Mhm.
just it's about class. Like for me, that the coronavirus has really made me sort of wake up and go. And I don't like using that phrase that just came into my head, but it's made me
Wake up,
realize
sheeple.
that there is
Doesn't like waking up.
yeah, yeah, I don't wake up. So
He's
it's
woke, guys.
well, I suppose the thing is, who am I to judge? That I'm the one who's awake. Like why does it get to be me who's the lucky one? Anyway, there is a class system happening in Australia, right? Like you have the rich people and the sports stars and the prime ministers jet setting around. They break a rule and they say, "Oh, it doesn't really matter." Not that he broke any rules, I guess, but like they get exemptions to these rules constantly, right? They get exceptions, they get benefits, they get to quarantine at home, they get to do all these other things. Whereas you have these genuine stories of heartache from people who can't visit their relatives from one state to the other. You've got people praising Western Australia for their hard borders, and that's just causing heartache to business. It's causing heartache to international travel. It's causing heartache to relatives. It's causing heartache all over the place, right? And so it's
Well, that's the two-faced nature of it, I think, right? You were saying that people not being able to cross borders. There've been so many stories about people who've got people in their family dying of cancer, and they're not in lockdown, but they can't go from one state to the next, even though they live on the border, and the other person's just on the other side of the border. That sort of story, and you're like, the prime minister and people like Dutton will be like, the rules are the rules are the rules, and then they just flaunt them when it suits them.
Yeah,
That's
that's
I think
right.
the most offensive thing,
It's
right?
it-
There's
it's
no
not
exceptions unless it's for them.
Yeah, and it's not a breaking of the rules; it's the flaunting of the rules. And like you said, it's not that we're
Mm-hmm.
going to suffer with you; we're gonna suffer against you. And it's almost as if they're quite happy to weigh up, or someone on their team's done the maths about, well, this will cause you so many points in the polls. You know, you've got to ask yourself, is it worth it to fly to Sydney for your family? No, but yeah, it's probably worth it to fly to Sydney for my family. I'm happy to take a bit of a hit. I'll do an interview with some soft weight on Channel 9, and we'll get it done, and then it'll be on to the next thing anyway. Gladys is announcing she's not doing press conferences next week. That'll take up the news as soon as I'm all done, so that's all good. We'll just weigh it up and we'll do it. Like,
I think there's another side to this that we aren't considering that I think we need to, which is that our Prime Minister genuinely needs his family, Jenny and the girls, in order to understand situations occurring around Australia, to have them explained to him. So
Yeah.
I think we
That
need
rape
to
is bad,
understand.
or
Yeah, look, we are potentially robbing the Prime Minister of important contextualisation, of important social, and he attended, and one of the upcoming stories is around the women's summit, how can we expect our Prime Minister to empathise with people who he is not? So I think I think this Father's Day trip was really important. It's not just about bringing Scott home. It's about bringing Scott and his empathy home, in order to spread that empathy.
Look, I tend to just to bring it over to the women's summit that happened. I don't want to embarrass myself with my lack of information about it. What I did catch was was the Prime Minister's speech, and to hear him say, women are not safe. They're not safe at home. They're not safe in their workplace. They're not safe in the streets. He says, in this very building, where I'm speaking to you from today, that this is what triggered off this conversation. It is women not being safe. They're not safe here. And I sort of thought, well, that's pretty straightforward. That was a pretty blunt, good message. No, not good enough for some people. Still just, creaming him. But I suppose it was the action that they're saying that it's wonderful that he said that, but where's the action where's the meaningful action from any of this?
I always get pissed with that sort of stuff, right? I get irritated when people point out so many issues, but then there's no, here's where we need to go next. Here's what we need to do. It's just problem. See you guys, I'm out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and that's probably the criticism, right? Like I say, I don't want to embarrass myself with that, but in my view, he was probably never going to really put the right foot forward there. Having already messed up with trips around, and already it seems the foresight just isn't there from a political perspective. But I think to make a link to American politics as well, I think that he sort of has this. Because he's more right wing, there's this sort of well, if he does something, it's just the left who are complaining, and they're just a bunch of whingers. Of course he's allowed to fly around. He didn't break any rules. He said this at the summit. He said what you wanted him to say. Let's just move on. So it's not like everyone's on board with this criticism and this constant barragement of berating him. They can sort of just say, look, he's got a job to do and he's doing it well, and let's just move on. I suppose, I don't know.
It's this was an important thing to occur. This year in Australia, Australia didn't really have a Me Too movement, if you like. We, I suppose, missed out. Sorry, I'm using wrong terminology here, but essentially, Australia didn't commit to the changes that other countries did as part of that movement that came out of Me Too. For many reasons, but in the last year, there has been a significant amount of allegations made, of charges placed, of highlighting the issues around women's safety at work. And this summit was all about It was all about bringing those issues forward as the Prime Minister laid out in his opening speech in order to develop a national framework. So all really important stuff. Now, the Prime Minister said that he was there to listen, and strategically, I think he failed a little bit in terms of, he decided that he was going to be the one that gave the opening speech instead of, listening. It was a 2-day summit. So, there are a few missed opportunities there, particularly from the strategic perspective. There was also...
Can you imagine the backlash if he didn't speak?
To be honest, it's one of those things that sometimes you have to measure up things. Yeah, sure. He could have chaired one of the. Panels. He could have, just been a panel member, or he could have just been an active participant in the conversation. Because this was all around developing a national framework, which is, a major strategic piece of work around. Sorry, go.
Imagine if he'd given his slot to someone else, though. More important, right? Find someone else that's got an important message for them to share and just say, oh, well, I was meant to be speaking, but it's more important for this. But there are so many different ways that you could do it that would make you look like a better person, right?
Yeah.
Who is more clued in.
Yeah.
Well, you kind of need to be genuine about that rather than just making it look good. But yeah, it's just unfortunate. It was a bit of an unfortunate thing. I would say, again, the goal that they had, i.e., to form this national framework around women's safety at work, incredibly important, and you significantly hope that work does come to fruition. It was quite interesting to listen to Marise Payne, the Minister for Women, her closing address, where she was effectively saying, people should have just tried harder in this summit. They should have put aside the stuff that's happened in the past. We need to move forward, et cetera, et cetera. That's not, a closing statement is the thing where you lay out, these are the next steps. This is us moving forward. This is us, acting towards meaningful change. So anyway, we're three dudes on a podcast, and, neither of us have that lived experience, but it's just, it was a bit of a missed opportunity from the Prime Minister's perspective, but sincerely hope that it is a good step forward for Australia.
It's an ongoing conversation, right?
Yep.
Now, I've put up a little fact sheet up here, which was interesting. I found it interesting. Clearly, I got it from Reddit because that's where the screenshot's from. So I didn't double check any of the facts, right?
Hey, it got a lot of upvotes.
It did get a lot of upvotes, right? So you hope most of those people double checked it, right? Scott Morrison.
I think, Scott, sorry to punch it. I think people will be the first to let you know, right, that you're wrong on Reddit. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
So Scott Morrison is officially the longest-serving post-Howard Prime Minister. There you go. 3 years and what it'll be like 3 years and 7 days, I guess, by now. So you've got. I think actually it was 13 days ago. So you're up to. So Malcolm Turnbull was 2 years and 343 days. Julia Gillard was 3 years and 3 days, and Scott Morrison is up to 3. It'll be up to 3 years and 14 days or 17 days or something. So it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, but I think that just goes to show that the Liberal Party, right?
It does. Yeah.
Yes.
They dumped him.
It sure does show that they were.
Oh, punchlines.
What are they doing? What are the Liberal Party? It shows that the Liberal Party are what? The party of the NBN?
Yes.
Yes, it sure does. Now, there you go. There's a little plug for Aussie English.
I'm going to leave it at that.
We are so profound. We are with Pete Smissen from the Aussie English podcast. Pete, just as a quick interlude, where can people find more information about Aussie English, aside from YouTube and Facebook every 20 minutes?
And also
go outside and speak to an Australian.
Why'd you say it?
Just search. You just search Aussie English. You'll find me. You'll find Aussie English on YouTube or at the website. But yeah.
Do you have a favorite?
We're not here to talk about Aussie English. We're here to talk about you guys.
I don't care. What do we talk about? I want to talk about Aussie. Do you? What? Have you got a favorite success story from Aussie English? Do you have a story that sticks out in your mind from someone who was just like, man, I could not have come to this country and done what I did without your podcast?
Oh, thousands. thousands, Greg.
All right. Let's not. Let's
We
not.
just asked
I
for
have-
one.
just-
We just
did I
asked
tell you-
one.
did I-
This podcast doesn't go forever, Pete.
I know. Did I tell you about the Brazilian that arrived in Canberra and we were the first people he met on the street?
We've run out of
and he was
time,
like,
unfortunately, for this segment.
yeah, that's it.
I think you might have.
I
but-
blew his mind. So that was
Yeah.
pretty. That was pretty good.
yeah, right. He was like you're Pete from the Aussie English podcast.
He literally got off the plane and was walking down the street with his bags with his wife, and we were the first people he saw and spoke to in Australia, and he'd been listening to my podcast for 6 months.
He must have thought you were.
And he was just like,
He must have thought
"What
you were
the
some sort of celebrity, and there was like 6 people who lived in Australia or something.
Well, that's
Or they
it.
just-
I felt like it. I'm like, this place is bigger than that, right? Like, this is just my
We're
home.
just all Pete's here. It's Pete's all the
That's
way
it.
down.
Yeah.
Yep.
I know. That's it. No, that was.
Yeah, you
interesting
tell that
came-
story literally every time you come on.
Yeah,
here.
out
It'd
of
be
the
great if you
thousands
could
of
come up
people,
with
Pete,
something
you've
That's the
got-
best one I've got.
original.
That's the only one I've got. I've already gotten to that age, right? Where it's like,
yes.
did I tell you that time about the onions? Yeah.
Remember that time? Yeah.
Dear me. Anyway,
Well, hang on. I've got a follow up question.
Sure.
Pete, Aussie English. What is your favourite Aussie English word or phrase?
Oh,
I'm
man.
not going to limit you just to words.
So we're G-rated though, right? So I got to think
Yeah.
carefully.
but you can say
Yeah,
like
you do.
F and C. Maybe
yeah,
not
you can
C.
substitute.
Don't say C.
Jesus. not C or yeah. I don't know. I tell you what I do
Don't use
love.
the
I
letter C.
love the Northern Territory ad CU in the
No,
NT.
I love that so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that encapsulates so much Australian culture. It's just gold. And I just
Yeah.
love that that's like a huge thing that the government pushed, right? So
Yeah,
yeah,
it wasn't
that was
actually. It was a
amazing.
private company. You know that, right?
Was it?
was a private
Okay. Well,
company,
I just saw it
so,
so
yeah.
often I assumed it was the government.
Actually, the government completely disavowed them, being that they are the Liberal government. They
Ah, bugger.
completely
All right.
disavowed themselves of that. But so I've got a "See You in the NT" sticker on my Land Cruiser. It's gets a good work out. I love it. Yeah, I know, right? I'll show you
got-
my Southern Cross tattoo later.
You were tricked, Pete. You were tricked. Now,
I know, it's a trap.
all right. Now, speaking of the Federation, right? We whatever that is, right?
Good segue.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Speaking of things that bring everyone together, right? Vaccinations, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I've got a little list here, right? As of this very second, 40.4% of Australians are fully vaccinated. All right, that's not New South Wales. It's not Victoria. That's Australia-wide, 40.4%. Not too bad, right? It does seem like a snail's pace when you check it every day. My advice, don't check it every day, right? Especially when you're in your 75th day of lockdown. First dose is 65.4%. So we're at 65.4%. Now I did a lot of research around this, right? I've done a lot of research around this. And it's quite interesting because the statistics show that getting your first dose is often quite like the underrequisite for getting your second dose.
That sentence did not make sense.
Right? That's the science, okay? That's the science. You can't argue with that, right?
Can I argue with
Like
that? 'Cause I don't
100% of people who get their second
These are
dose,
just alternative facts.
100% of people who get their second dose get their first dose, right?
Yeah. Okay. All right.
So-
Yep, I'm with you.
So if my math checks out, right,
Which it does.
then 40.4% of people had their first dose and their second dose, right? Because
Yeah.
they're fully vaccinated. If all of those people get their second dose who had their first dose, then we should be higher than 60% at some stage.
Yep. Also, 8 out of 10 statistics made up.
Well,
Can
I want to know if anyone just goes their first dose and just goes, no, not going back.
Yeah, heaps of people actually. Oh well, yeah. So a huge number of people who went and got their first dose as AstraZeneca immediately after the initial lots of ATAGI advice came out. They essentially failed to turn up for their second appointment of Astra, and that was across the country. Felt in the state-based and territory-based vaccination centres, as well as in general practitioners who are also the mainstay for delivering that vaccine.
Do you know about whether or not people switched and had a second vaccine that was a different type? Because I've heard,
Yep.
I've got one friend who's in Germany and he did that. I think he had like Pfizer and Moderna or something weird where he had a combination. But in Australia, it'd be interesting to see
Now
how
my
many
left
people
head
switch
talks
from
to my
Astra
right
to...
head. Yeah.
Yeah. But would that make a difference too? Or would it be exactly the same effect?
So
effectively?
it doesn't. So apparently, well, the studies haven't been, whatever studies do, right? They haven't been cross-checked or whatever. But early studies are showing that a combination of AstraZeneca and Pfizer is actually better for you than just having double AstraZeneca or double Pfizer. Not significant enough for everyone to start doing it, but it is. But that's what the early studies are showing. So, and I know that with the vaccine passport that you get on your phone in Australia, once you or whatever your digital one, whatever with when you have your double dose. Now, one of the ways that you'll be able to prove that you're vaccinated, right? If you go out for these, we get picnics on Monday or something. So when you get that, when you go out, you can prove that you're vaccinated using a digital passport. Now, you can't get a digital passport on your phone if you got AstraZeneca and Pfizer, and they explicitly mentioned that today in the news article. So it's obvious that it's happening. I don't know why it would be happening, probably for those reasons that we've discussed, because people want extra heads. But that they can't use the digital passport. They actually have to download it from Medicare and use that one. So they have to have.
But I thought I saw an article today that was saying that the digital passport's not going to work because you can buy them for $200 online.
Yeah, why not? I don't know
that'll
why it
be
doesn't come with a little
Believe
QR code
everything
on
that
it.
Reddit says, Pete. Yeah, sure. Yeah, no.
Well, no, I read that on Reddit too, because the top comments were like, but it's free to get the vaccine, so why the hell would you pay $200 to get it?
Because you don't want the vaccine, right? That's the thing. I don't want. It's like, man, you're going out of your way, aren't you? I really don't want to get vaccinated.
The technology and the immunity conveyed is different. So the
That's what I was wondering.
Process is different.
As a scientist, I would love to know what would happen if you get, say, AstraZeneca and then Pfizer. What's happening immunologically? Inside your body.
Two
and
separate
is it gonna
parallel processes.
Right.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So it'll be funny to see what happens to your immune system if you just, I get them all. I collect them like Pokemon cards. Give me all the vaccines.
It used to be green and blue and red. Yeah, just goes purple.
Well, one of the arguments is we don't know about the brand of flu vaccine that we get, right? You just rock up at your workplace and you get your flu vaccine, right? What is that the same sort of thing? Are there just different brands and you don't know which brand you're getting and you just stabbed with whatever?
There can only be one.
This is the very long. This is gonna okay. Yeah. There's lots.
I love when Jake gets.
Don't say okay like you're going to launch
do I
into the long
explain to
bit.
These morons, or do we just go to the next topic?
Can't you just summarize it, Jake? Summarize it.
Well, it depends, right? So you can get the quadrivalent, you can get the trivalent.
right.
They generally have different producers.
Okay.
Some of them are made in Australia, some of them are made in India, some of them are made in other countries. It entirely depends on what state and where we are in the year, i.e., how long since the flu variants were picked and put into the vaccine. Are you having your vaccine? Anyway, I hope that sentence made sense.
Yeah, absolutely. But moving on, we are on track, right? So the government has said that we are on track. Australia's troubled vaccine rollout is back on track to meet its original aim. This is from the Financial Review of having enough.
We're on the track.
We're on a track. Is on track to meet the original aims of having enough doses for all eligible adults by mid-October, making up for months of setbacks caused by the problems with the AstraZeneca vaccine, Scott Morrison said. So Mr. Morrison, who is expected to announce a vaccine swap deal with another country, I was going to say with any other country, with another country within days, acknowledged the mistakes that derailed the rollout and forced the government to scramble to find extra doses of Pfizer, but dismisses the critics as heroes of hindsight.
So to be clear, he said, I acknowledge the mistakes. He didn't specifically call out the mistakes or who was responsible. Nobody's paid for their mistakes.
I would love to be able to say that I had the details for you, Jake, but I just got a notification from the Financial Review saying that I've reached my article limit for the day. so I only had the top bit, which was dramatized, obviously, and I don't have the details down the bottom. Yeah. So I don't know whether or not he actually mentioned them.
Incognito mode. Incognito mode.
I don't know what that is, but anyway. Yeah, keep going.
No, Yeah, so essentially, look, the Prime Minister acknowledged that there have been issues, there have been failures, but didn't specifically say what those failures were, who was responsible for them. Certainly didn't point out that there was an opportunity back in June of last year to have an interface, or sorry, back in April of last year to have an interface with the vaccine giant Pfizer. Particularly around the time where he was being told by multiple experts to diversify your portfolio and to try and get your hands on as many different vaccine types, because we don't know which one is going to be the successful one. Is it Covax? Is it Moderna? Is it this Pfizer one? Is it AstraZeneca? Is it, something else? Is it Johnson and Johnson? Hey, you guys. So, it's
But
just,
isn't it?
it's
What,
just,
what are the mistakes? What were the mistakes? Like
Miscommunication. Wasn't that the biggest one with AstraZeneca, where they were saying, we don't recommend people under this age get it, and then they did recommend it, and so
But wasn't that? But that wasn't a mistake
having
under those
hesitancy.
particular conditions. Like at that time, before everyone started freaking out and getting coronavirus all over the place, that was technically good advice, wasn't it? To sort of say, hey, let's hold back. It's not a race. No one in Australia had coronavirus at that stage. We were getting like 0 cases, so let's not risk it. It's exactly what your Queensland chief health officer said. I forget, is it Jeanette Young?
Jeanette Young, yeah.
Yeah, go me. Right. She said, I don't want to see any young people dying from getting AstraZeneca and blood clots because no one's dying from coronavirus. She then changed her advice when everyone started getting coronavirus and people started dying and saying, all right, let's get AstraZeneca out there. And the medical, what are they called? TGA, Targi. They changed their advice, or the medical association changed their advice to say, now that everything's changed, our advice has changed. Go and get AstraZeneca. Go and get jabbed, because this is gonna go crazy. And if we don't get jabbed, all the signs are pointing to an absolute overrun of the system. I suppose what my question is, what did Scott Morrison do other than, be Scott Morrison?
Wouldn't it be that he was sort of also watching what was happening in other countries and how quickly things were taking off? And you would imagine that you would be aware that could happen at any time in Australia, whilst we're bringing back 3,000 or 4,000 people a week or whatever it was into the country who potentially had COVID. That you think you would be aware of the fact that we need to at least have vaccines. Some of these vaccines.
Yeah.
Yes.
And at roughly the same time as he was failing to
give you a
diversify.
clue that you're back, Pete. We'll wink like this.
That's it.
Yeah, we'll ring
The
a bell.
best bit that I said was when I was paused. So
Yeah,
I hope you agree.
It was great.
Sorry.
It was a very salient.
I've got this noise, Pete. I'll use this when you're back. Okay.
Back to real
Let me
time.
know.
Yeah. Look, at the same time that he was failing to diversify the vaccine portfolio, he was effectively saying we need to get out from under our doonas. I.e., we need to open up. We need to not be a nation divided. Of big walls between each of the states, and iron fences around, or iron barriers around our CBDs. So there was we cannot understate the failure of really failing to diversify that portfolio of vaccines. And what it has meant is that Australia is still locked down and still racing to vaccinate. What Pfizer has said and only I should say that the government has essentially said that of the emails that have been released around this week around the meetings that were requested by the pharmaceutical giant Pfizer, essentially asking to meet with the health minister to commence conversations around getting access to the Pfizer vaccine. The government and several government ministers are saying that we're only seeing part of the conversation, so potentially there's more in there. But what it meant was what Pfizer was essentially saying as part of that conversation is you could have enough vaccine for your country by the end of 2020. Well, we are close to the end of 2021, and what are we at? 40.9% of Australian population vaccinated, and we've had plenty of time for a misinformation campaign. We've had plenty of time for stuff to go wrong with AstraZeneca, and I'm not talking about the AstraZeneca vaccine being wrong. I'm talking about or bad. I'm talking about the information and misinformation that came up around that. About the overstating of the risk or lack of contextualization around the risk of that vaccine. It could be. So AstraZeneca, it's been found this week. There's been a bunch of studies published looking at the efficacy of the different vaccine types over time. Israel, who got Pfizer, is up to their 4th booster shots now. They are now delivering their 4th booster shots, whereas it seems that AstraZeneca, old technology, tried and true technology, that it conveys a longer immune response, or a longer immunity. So it's unfortunate. It's just the way that the cookie crumbles. We had a homegrown vaccine, the OGAZ. And we unfortunately we failed to properly do that. So look, what are the government's failings in this area? I think they're multifaceted. Are they talking about what those actual failings are? No, they're just acknowledging that there were failings and moving on.
Mm-hmm.
We still have a health minister who is going strong. We still have. Plenty of other ministers, aged care minister failing to immunise people in aged care. We've got an Indigenous affairs minister. We've got plenty of people in Indigenous communities that have not yet been vaccinated. We've got a failure to communicate. We've got a failure to deliver. It's just, again, it's multifaceted. It has, there's lots of context behind that, and I'm not certainly saying that Prime Minister Scott Morrison is responsible for all of that, but certainly there is a lot of failings that can be tied back to the federal government.
This would probably be an interesting point to segue to what we've all experienced on the ground with our own states' reactions to this, right? So if you guys walk outside and go have a conversation with the people around you, how does the average person, at least that it's obviously a sort of subjective sampling, think that their respective governments has done, their state governments?
Well, like obviously in New South Wales, right? It's easy to go outside and and you just basically spin and point, and you'll find someone who's ready to have a go at Gladys, right? And she's also open to the fact that she's quite thing. Now you have to, in my view, you have to believe one of two things, right? You either have to believe that she was getting health advice that said to lock down specific LGAs and not do a massive lockdown, or at least you didn't have to do this massive lockdown. As long as the people in those LGAs do the right thing, we'll all be good. You have to believe that happened behind closed doors, and then Gladys has come out and said, yes, or that's what we're doing. Or you have to believe that the health people said, you have to go into a massive lockdown, and Gladys has gone, no, I don't think so. I'm not doing that. Thank you very much. And then gone out and lied about what the health advice was. So my brain isn't equipped to deal with that sort of paranoia, right? So I have to believe by default, just with the way my brain works, that she did the right thing, right? So I have to believe that now that is tricky when you're having conversations with other people, because everyone's just ready to, Neko, if I go to the dog park, there's always someone there ready to just be like, how terrible is our government? We didn't do a lockdown. And you just go, yes, absolutely. Like, I definitely don't get into those sorts of discussions. But they're the sorts of ones that are, and I'm like, why am I talking to these dogs? And because they're the only ones who'll talk to me about this sort of stuff.
This Chihuahua is so racist.
Yeah, this Chihuahua is really enlightened. Now, so that's the general vibe. That's what happens in my head when I have conversations with people. It's easy to bag out the government. It's easy to say that, I like this heroes of hindsight thing, right? It's easy to say, we should have done this, we should have done that. Now we're seeing, it's interesting because you've got the dual cases, what do you call it? The dual case examples of New Zealand going into a strict lockdown, and their cases are plummeting, right? They're going down very quickly. Then you've got Dan Andrews, dictator man, doing his thing, and they're not going down. And in fact, you're witnessing the same change in conversation that we witnessed, which is, vaccinations, how good are they? And yeah, we're going to live with the virus. And, you're watching that in real time occur somewhere else. So there's something else happening There's something else. There's another factor involved in this other than just lockdowns. Whether it's population, whether it's where the people work, whether it's whether it's the socio-economic areas in which the virus is spreading, whether it's whatever it is. There's other factors at play here that people just mere mortals can't understand. And we've plateaued. We've plateaued at this 1,400, 1,500. I would have much rather plateaued at a lower number, but I'd much rather plateau at this than a higher number. And apparently we're still reaching our peak and all that sort of thing. But generally speaking, people that I speak to are ready to hang Gladys Berejiklian. Now, that's fine. I think you need a bad guy. You need someone to target with all of this anger, and there's a lot of angry people out there. And I can see definite clear mistakes that weren't related to lockdowns. But at the same time, those same people are now navigating us out of that. So that's pretty neat, I think. And so people are put into a bit of a tough spot because they're going, well, hang on. It's what's happening down in Victoria is the same sort of thing that was happening here. And so, maybe it is the case that Western Australia is going to have to deal with a few cases at some stage. Maybe it is the case that, that Queensland's going to have to suffer through a little bit of this as well. Let's just get as many people vaccinated as we can before the let her rip scenario takes hold. So as I guess my point is, along with the conversation shifting and along with the statistics shifting, I can sense that the conversations in the general public are shifting as well, because everyone's tired and we just want to go, I don't know, everyone wants to go for a picnic for some strange reason. I don't know why, but anyway. So I think there's a lot of people who pretend to like picnics at the moment because we're allowed to go on picnics on Monday. So it's like if you're double vaccinated. So yeah. Not that I have an opinion about that, Pete. I hope you don't regret asking, but yeah.
It's quite interesting.
No. It's interesting to know what you think and what you've experienced, because obviously Jake and I are both in different states. So we see the TV and we speak to the people outside, but we don't get to see what it's like on the ground in New South Wales.
Well, Bustello
I love that comment.
Chimed in and said, avian viruses are just baby spirits. Welcome to space, mates. Thank you, Bustello.
Yeah.
Feel free to leave as many comments as you like. Why not? We'll bring them up. We'll discuss them. Look, Pete's in a state of shock. He can't believe how.
I know.
Like that
yeah,
one.
it is quite interesting, Greg, because I love it. I feel like the sentiment towards the Berejiklian government as well was not helped by that super adversarial inquiry into the coronavirus spread. A couple of months ago, or a couple of weeks ago, even with Brad Hazard and Kerry Chant. It was a super adversarial inquiry. It was a super adversarial press conference afterwards. But likewise, why are you holding an inquiry into the crisis while you're in the middle of a crisis? It was the wrong time to hold it.
That's right.
But
and if it's a political move to have people at home going, look, I agree with Brad Hazard. That's. You've just a whole bunch of people are going, actually, he's speaking a lot of sense. Why on earth are you holding this inquiry during, and poor Kerry Chant, who's just the hero of our state at the moment for a vast majority of people, sitting there looking just disheveled and so exhausted and just knowing that how she could be helping the thousands of people who are suffering from coronavirus at the moment, but had to take part in this inquiry. It was terrible to watch. But it had to be had, right? It had to be had. And we had to hear Kerry Chant saying that that the government was following her advice, that this was not some ruse, that she's not some political puppet, that they followed my advice. What more do you want me to say? Let's move on, And it's not just her advice either. Like, she's part of the advisory committee.
Brad Hazard, though, was an interesting tactic.
He's an easy target. He's a very easy target for good reason.
No, I know, but what I'm saying is she was, in many occasions she was directly asked questions, and he took the answer for her, and he gave the answer why, which was this woman, this person, this human being, this superhuman woman has been working extraordinarily long hours across extraordinarily long days, keeping our statesmen safe.
Yeah.
And you're holding an inquiry into a crisis in the middle of a crisis, taking her away from the crisis, which is her job, managing the crisis.
Yeah.
I think I'll speak for her anyway.
All right. Well, let's. I don't want to get all New South Wales on everyone, because I know that we've got
what do you think about John Barilaro?
Other states and territories. He's a good cook. I know that much.
Good old Braz.
Now, yeah. Okay. Now, one of the things that has come up a fair bit recently is Afghanistan, right? And Australia's role in Afghanistan. I can imagine you gents have got quite strong. Cool. I think we all dropped out a little bit there. Hang on. Here we go. That was a tense moment. Is Afghanistan, right? Now, I've got my views on this, but I've already had the floor a little bit. Jake, well, Pete, you're our guest. We'll go to you. How do you well, you know a lot of people overseas, right? How has this whole debacle been viewed?
Oh, it's affected me quite a bit because I have a few students who one of them is in Queensland, and she's a young girl whose parents they work for the government and are still in Afghanistan hiding at the moment, effectively, trying to avoid getting a bullet. So it's just been brutal knowing the people who are involved. And, I've broken down a few times just talking about it online, doing these sorts of things, because you just see those scenes at the airport with people throwing their babies over fences, and it's just screwed up. And I think, like most Australians probably who viewed this and were following it, you were just astonished that Scott Morrison, as well as the US, could have just completely screwed this up. It was almost like Gallipoli in reverse, right? Where the withdrawal from Gallipoli was the best thing that the Anzacs kind of managed without losing a single person, right? It was the best part of that entire escapade in the First World War. Whereas this, it's like the round, like finishing up this 20-year war was a massive screw up. So I'm just amazed that we knew things were winding down for so long. I think whatever it was, 7 or 8 months that we'd been announcing it, and we hadn't been pulling people out. We'd just been telling them, to sit tight, get your documents in order, and it'll happen. And then, lo and behold, the Taliban just go through everyone like nothing. Effectively, people threw their weapons down. I watched the Four Corners episode on this last night, and that as well just opened my eyes to just how much of a joke this was, and that Biden just threw the Afghan army under the bus, saying that they did nothing, and none of them were fighting. When I think one of the generals one of the military men that were being interviewed who'd worked in Afghanistan said that the Afghan army was losing more people than the entire US had lost in 20 years on a monthly basis fighting the Taliban. They were just tired. And, you just like, as well, how could you leave? I think they left billions of dollars worth of infrastructure and weapons and everything, and the Taliban have just picked that up for free, effectively.
Well, they scuttled a lot of it.
There's no way you can get in. I don't know. It's just, there are so many F-ups. You just kind of like, it's like watching a really slow train crash.
I watched that same...
And then with the suicide bombings as well, you just like could have seen that happen. Like, I mean, Jesus.
Yeah, I watched that same Four Corners episode, and it seemed to me like they really struggled to find anyone who would say, yes, this was a good idea and it was done very well. It's funny that you mention it, because I couldn't help but take a bunch of notes while I was watching it, right? So Professor William Maley, the author of Afghanistan Wars, he said that the 2020 negotiations, which were done by Trump and the Taliban, were the single biggest diplomatic failure, in the sense that the Taliban basically got everything that they could want. They got a place at the high table with the US, and they got a strict timetable of US forces and contractors to be leaving. All right. On top of that, I was reading in the Wall Street Journal about the fact that not only were they leaving, they had already basically left, and so the Afghan army were not left with any sort of, they weren't left with the right tools for the job to be fighting against the Taliban as the Taliban made their way through the country. So it was the Taliban who were given who were given the privilege of negotiations with the US. Then the US has started pulling out, and they've left all that sort of, I don't know, that they didn't leave the Afghan army with the right tools for their jobs, for any recon missions, for any sort of fighting missions or anything like that. They just basically said, look, we've trained you now, and we're out.
They weren't getting paid, right? I think there was a big issue with a lot of them not being paid for months, so that not only was there obviously no real reason for them to be there monetarily, but they weren't able to put bread on the table for their families. So it's like, why the hell would I be here fighting this war for nothing then, effectively? And that the Trump didn't even bring the Afghan army to the table, the Afghan government to the table in those negotiations.
Yeah, and it was completely blown away. Professor David Kilcullen, who was also on that particular episode from the Australian Defence Force Academy, said that the US excluded the government from negotiations and totally delegitimised the government in that sense. I know that I forget the Prime Minister's name, but he's recently apologised for fleeing the country.
What, from Turkey?
Sorry, my bad. Absolutely shocking. The US evacuated 122,000 people during those 2 weeks, and Australia evacuated 4,100. The blast that occurred killed 200 Afghan people and 13 US troops. There was a story in there about the Australian interpreter who had made camp right with the Australian army there. He was welcome on the base. He was, he ate with them in the mess hall, all that sort of stuff, and he's just left there. And he got approved for his visa, and then they said it was issued in error. So now he's still in limbo around this whole thing, and he's got a family, and he's completely stuck there.
That's the most frustrating thing. I think it sort of ties in with COVID, right? It's just that the government, a lot of the things too.
Hang on.
Yeah, well said.
Hang on, you've dropped out a second.
Yeah.
Just come back in. You'll be back in a
Did
second.
I have a good frozen screen with
You
my,
did it.
my face nice?
Look, I won't lie to you. It wasn't.
Yeah, that's it.
Keep going. You were saying it tied in with COVID.
It's just so annoying that it's so delayed. It's almost like the Western governments are just acting so slowly to do these things where they have so much warning. And I mean, I know heroes of hindsight, but at the same time, some of these things are so obvious in hindsight that you would think during the period you just like, it's like cramming for the exam during the exam, right? Like that is almost what it felt like, the Kabul pullout. You're kind of like, oh shit, we got to get out of here. Yeah, it's like, no, dude, they've entered the city. It's probably too late for you to be like, maybe we should do something now. Like you're in the thick of it.
Absolutely horrific, Pete. But Jake, what are your thoughts on this? Have you I don't know. Have you got anyone who's affected by it? Are you or is it just an emotional attachment? Do you remember where you were for 9/11?
I do. I was working at a gym. It was my first proper career job out of high school, and we obviously had streaming TVs, as gyms often do, and the TV started playing it. The radio started playing it. I changed the channel. It was on every channel. It was absolutely devastating.
Mm-hmm.
I remember all of the trainers and all of the salespeople back in the days where gyms were profitable enough to have trainers and salespeople and admin officers and people who answered the phones, who knew you needed a phone for a gym. Anyway, we all basically sat side by side in the cafe that was in the gym. Who knew you have a cafe in a gym, right? And we watched the footage. It was absolutely harrowing. Nowadays, my wife's American. She feels very connected to the day of 9/11. She's never been to New York and never been to Washington or DC. But she feels a lot of that shared pain that I think a lot of Americans feel around that time. And the Australian move to assist America and back up the ANZUS Treaty and go in to support America's war in Afghanistan. Many people, including former Prime Minister John Howard, has made a lot of remarks, particularly recently, around he felt that and feels to this day that the move to back America in this war and to go in to essentially dismantle the Taliban leadership in Afghanistan was important to prevent another terrorist attack. If he feels that to this day. Whether that is the truth, who knows? And how could we know that stuff is for the annals of history? But I have a number of people in my family who are, former ADF people who have served in Afghanistan and in the other parallel or adjacent wars in Iraq. And they've been particularly affected over the last few weeks, watching, not necessarily the people, but people who have worked within and adjacent to the ADF. To essentially see them under threat of their life. These were people who were receiving threats from the Taliban while they were interpreters, 5-10 years ago, still getting those things, and it now being extraordinarily real, for those former serving ADF personnel. It's a really tough time, but look, I don't have anything nice to say. It's unfortunate. From the Australian perspective, we got out just as quickly as the Americans did. Obviously, we had to go with them, lest we be left behind as well. It is just so unfortunate that we didn't put in the effort that was necessary in order to get all of those people. All of those Australian citizens, Australian immigrants, people with Australian citizenship, people with Australian visas, people who had previously worked with Australian Defence Forces, that we weren't able to get them out in time.
It's harrowing though, right? Because from that Four Corners thing, you see some of them and they're like, we should believe change. Then
yes. Yeah, you just dropped out for a second, but I think you're talking about trust and about the fact that that these people put trust in the Australian government, or at least Western governments, right? Because there'd be a lot of I think the US government isn't even putting a figure on the amount of US people they couldn't get out from Afghanistan. So the public don't know how many US individuals are still trapped in Afghanistan, and I think that there's planes of US people who weren't getting out, essentially the Taliban using them as hostage, and so the trust, and then they've just said, well, we're not going back, that's it, we're done. So the trust has been broken. I think that's what you were saying before the Matrix.
Well, the harrowing thing was just, it seems like in the media too, a lot of the talk, the feeling I've gotten is that people don't seem to understand how dangerous it is for these people who've had any association with the Western countries that were involved. Like from that Four Corners thing, and then from other things that I've read and people I've spoken to, it's like anyone who worked with anyone from Australia or from the US is getting a bullet. Like, it's that simple. There's no, the Taliban are going to forgive and forget, as they keep saying on TV, we're going to forgive and forget and rebuild the country. It's like, no, anyone on the ground knows that if you get caught and they find out that you worked, you're gone. It's over.
And not immediately,
so
right? Like this, I heard one of the reporters talking about the fact that there would be phases, right? So this is phase one, where the Taliban put on a nice face, and then there's phase two, where they start to enact some of the laws and all that sort of stuff, and you can see that happening, right? No women in the official government, and they're saying, oh well,
what did they say?
There's room for movement. They said,
they've got 100% rights. It's just that they have no need to be working. They have no need to be in the government, and you're like, right, okay.
It's totally sickening, and it's absolutely heartbreaking. It's one of those things where you just are so overwhelmed, right? Like I was the morning the morning that the Taliban took over the country, because that's how it felt, right? It happened so quickly. I sat down with my son Beckett, and I said, look, this is interesting, because this is part of my history too. Like, I remember where I was for 9/11. This is a direct sort of consequence of that event, and he knew about 9/11 and sort of what happened. And I said, but now look at what's happening to this country that was involved in sort of well, I shouldn't say the country, but groups of individuals in that country were responsible for hunting the people responsible for 9/11, and and that's why we were there, and sort of saying, and now look, these people are really in need, and there's people, and those scenes of people chasing after the plane. They mentioned, I couldn't believe it, they managed to track down the identity of one of the people, the soccer player, right? Zaki Anwari, right? Afghan football player who fell to his death from the US plane in Kabul. Like, to actually be to put a name and an identity to that speck that fell from that plane is just heart wrenching. It's a heart wrenching process to go through.
Well, I just can't imagine having those sorts of interests or careers, right? Playing music, it's like you'll get a bullet for being a musician. You know, all of these sorts of things that are just so trivial for us. Whereas, yeah, in the Four Corners thing, they had that pop star, and she's like,
Yes.
if they get me, don't get me alive. I'm like, dear God, they are not going to kill me quickly. Just, and you just like,
That's
this
right.
isn't-
She said, "I'm not." She said,
You know,
right,
like,
word
what
for word.
was this?
She said, "Sorry, you're just dropping out a little bit," but she said, word for word, "I'm not afraid to die. I'm afraid of what they'll do to me before I die." Right? Like,
Yeah.
you know, she was terrified, and you
Well,
know,
and everyone that's related to me, anyone that knows me personally, is gone. Yeah.
it's really disappointing. And it's really, I mean, disappointing is not the right word, right? I often think about the words that Christopher Hitchens would use, and he wouldn't use a word like disappointing to describe this situation. Right? It's horrific, right?
I doubt it. You'd have more in the bag.
Horrific,
You know,
Yeah.
feckless.
I think too, I can't imagine how traumatized the public would be, right? The secular people in Afghanistan who lived through this 2 decades of, you know, getting a taste of what would equivalent, you know, I could see it as being heaven, right? They get a taste of this equal rights for everyone, and then they go back
secular
into
democracy.
the dark, right? Yeah, they go back into the dark, and it's like, I just can't, and not being able to escape from that and seeing that happen. I can't imagine too, if you were a parent raising children during that period and the children have only known that period of 20 years.
oh yeah,
You know,
just say, hey,
it would just, as a father, it just blows my mind. Like,
That's
I can't
right.
fathom some of these people throwing their babies over the fence. Like, that literally broke me when I saw that. I couldn't imagine it. And the pop star saying someone gave her their baby, and
Yeah.
just said, just take her,
Yeah.
take her. And you're like, I can't imagine being in that kind of a situation where I would be willing to give up my child and never knowing if I'd see them again, but just hoping they got out. You know, like,
Yeah.
it's just, yeah.
Well, she
Anyway.
said, right? She said when she got onto the plane and the footage shows it, right? No one was happy. No one was joyful that they were on
No.
that plane. She said it was just silent. You know, like everyone was just so incredibly sad about that whole situation. About
Well, you'd
leaving
feel
the country.
guilty for being happy, right? That I can't imagine being like, well, at least I got out. You know, like,
Yeah.
I can't imagine, because they would know so many people that were still there. So
That's right, and you'd have this part of your brain which is just like, well, you had to get out, right? You had to do what you had to do to survive. But what does that mean? You know, like survivor's guilt would just be a really you know, a very genuine part of their life from now on.
Yep. Trauma
that's-
is there
I
forevermore.
guess I'm so frustrated Australia didn't do more.
Well, what more could we have done, right? What like you're in charge? What would you do? You know?
All good
I think
questions.
just to have acted sooner, to have had something happening sooner with migrating these people out. You've had 20 years of this war. These people have been, you know, as that guy said on the show, for a decade or whatever, walking around with the highest amount of access to military facilities. It's like, it's not like we don't trust these people, so let's just get them out as soon as we're done, as soon as we're winding down. Like, have a plan, have an idea, like that this is a potential outcome. I mean, it's easy to say in hindsight, like, holy shit.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's
We'll have a genuine pathway, right? Have a genuine, solid pathway that people can apply to, have access to, while the rest of the infrastructure, the military infrastructure, is there, and then get them on planes and get them out of the country. You know, they took bullets for, they stood in front of bullets for Australian defence personnel. You know, we thank Australian defence personnel for their service. We will never have the opportunity to thank a number of these people because of the situation that we, as Australians, have put them in.
And that
it's just
creates
sad.
resentment, right, as well. So now we have this generation of people in Afghanistan who don't see the US and Australia as strong allies. You know, they see them as people who abandoned them, right? So you've got the cycle of hate and revenge brewing underneath all of this chaos and misery, right? Because as we've spoken about a few times tonight, right, you've got to have an enemy when you're so angry, right? Whether it's just, you know, whether it's a politician or whether it's, you know, yourself or whatever it is, you've got to have an enemy, right? And these people are going to grow up really angry about what happened. You know, so you can only speculate about who that enemy might be. It is tragic. It was really tragic to not sort of see any good conversations come from that particular Four Corners one. Whether or not there are good conversations to be had, I don't know. I was waiting for someone, at least someone, one of their guests, to say, "Oh, look, we did what we could," and it still didn't go great. But they just didn't say that. It's basically the writing's on the wall for a crime against humanity, really. But anyway. Anyway, I don't know. So we I'll put some links in the description below for a couple of charities that I know that I've started to donate to. Thanks, Pete. Thanks for your time. And and the UNHCR in particular are helping refugees with Afghanistan and things like that. So we can try and donate to a few of those charities. So I'll put a couple of charities in the link below for where you can donate to. That's all I've got to say about that one. What do you guys think? Are you guys ready to sort of call it a day? It's 1 hour and 14 minutes and 50 seconds.
I reckon we ended on a good note. The Victorian Liberal leader has just triumphed. Do you want to lead us into this one, Pete?
To be honest, I have not been following it. All right. I saw that there was the last time I saw the previous Liberal coalition leader here in Victoria on the news was probably 2020. So
right, well, he's just been elected
Dan's
again.
The man.
And guess what? He's got a plan to get Victorians out of coronavirus.
I don't know about that. I don't. Yeah, stick is the devil, right, Greg?
Yeah, look, it's pretty fascinating. So he's the same guy who got defeated by Dan Andrews, I think in 2018, if I've got my maths right, if I've got my dates right around that, an absolute landslide to Dan Andrews. Then they went to I forget the other guy's name now, the guy who you had before, Matthew.
Again, yeah.
I think that's why they got rid of him, right? Because no one knew his name, and apparently
he didn't seem to be saying anything useful online either. Like you would see him on the news, and he would just have nothing to say, whether it was controversial, against, for. Yeah. Anyway, he's got a pretty big reputation. If you get a chance, have a look into the controversy of the lobster with a mobster situation. Yes. Absolutely fascinating little story. I went down a little rabbit hole with that the other day because I was like, well, you know what? I run a political podcast. I'm gonna check out this Matthew guy, right? And the first thing that came up was this story about how he had a dinner with a mobster leader. This was way Frank
back then. Now this is no conspiracy, right?
Uncle Frank.
There's photos of this dinner, right? So this is the now current leader of the opposition, Matthew Guy, right? And this is from 2017, August 8, 2017, 5:31 p.m., right? Matthew Guy attended a secret dinner earlier this year with alleged head of Melbourne's mafia over several bottles of Penfolds Grange and a lobster restaurant in Melbourne's southeast. Mr. Guy dined at the Lobster Cave restaurant with Tony Madaffri, a wealthy market gardener and the owner of the La Pochetta pizza chain, even though Mr. Madaffri had repeatedly been accused by police in court of being a high-ranking member of Melbourne's mafia. Now, he's never been charged with anything. He's a really great guy, according to him, right?
Allegedly.
Fantastic. Yeah, allegedly head of the mafia, right? It happens to all good people, right?
Where there's smoke, there's fire. Yeah.
Okay, now I dug pretty deep into this. I got to tell you, I went down a little bit of a rabbit hole. Okay,
your shovel,
lobster hole.
Yeah. Now, okay, it turns out Mr. Madaffri went to Parliament House to have a meeting with Guy Matthews, right? Guess who's in this photo as well at the meeting in Parliament House is Greg Hunt, right? So Greg Hunt, right, with Tony Madaffri at a meeting at Parliament House. Right, and so these people are like, okay, apparently this whole Madaffri family were connected with the Liberals, but now they've disconnected themselves, allegedly, right? Anyway, so it's a real thing. There's a whole we've been speaking about it a bit tonight, but there's a whole Four Corners episode on the links between the Madaffri family and the Liberals in Victoria. He went to dinner with this Madaffri character, Tony Madaffri, whose father is the high-ranking member of the mafia. He's also a high-ranking member of the mafia. Frank Madaffri is his dad. And it's crazy. It's all got to do with the markets in Victoria and all this sort of stuff. Apparently the markets are a really good place for mafia business because you can
Also
go there.
coffee.
Yeah, you can go there and not do any mafia business, and so you waste all the police's time. But you can also go there and conduct mafia business, but really you just look like you're buying a fish. So it's actually a grocer's market, I think. So no fish, but anyway, like your fruit and veg. So
So many stereotypes.
it's so yeah, I know, right? But so it's just crazy. It was absolutely insane, and I thought, here we go. This guy's just been elected again. Like, how do you do that? And the guy, oh man, I wish I had the guy in front of me. The guy who actually called the spill is this absolute fruitcake of a man who goes on Sky News and espouses all the stuff about, coronavirus and vaccines are bad and blah, 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 all that sort of stuff. He's an absolute fruitcake of an individual. He's the one who called...
Craig Kelly.
No, it's not Craig Kelly, but a Craig Kelly, clone. And
the Craig Kelly version in state parliament for Victoria.
Anyway, it was just crazy. I don't want to go on and on about it, but I feel like I can. But like, it was just nuts. So I'll put a couple of links in this episode for that. But check it out. Like, spend some time in it because it's a fun rabbit hole to go down. Because you're not going down any conspiratorial stuff. It's all like, it's all like ABC News articles and it's all like The Age News articles and there's 4 corner episodes on it. It's just like, how did this guy who lost by an absolute landslide in 2018 to Daniel Andrews get back in? Who went, yep,
money.
He's the guy.
Well,
I would say though,
money
Greg,
will do it.
the thing that is most exciting about this is you got Daniel Andrews, a guy with 2 first names essentially as his first and last name.
We just call him Dandrews.
Dandrews. Oh no, Jake! It's the middle.
It's Jake.
It's the middle one.
It's
the
not
middle.
me. It is. I feel fine now.
Oh dear. I'm trying to frantically to find this name. Tim Smith. I think his name is. Yeah, MP Tim Smith, right? So yesterday, Mr. Guy stood down from the shadow cabinet along with fellow MP Tim Smith ahead of the leadership challenge. Tim Smith is the guy who called it, and he is just this absolute fruitcake of an individual. Anyway, I tried to get through as much of the 1 hour and 43-minute press conference as I could of your new opposition leader. Just because I'm curious. I think, I'll watch it, right? I'll watch and see what they have to say. He didn't have anything exciting to say. He was like, I'm going to have a plan to get us out of coronavirus. And I'm like, well, that's...
I'm against everything the opposition is for.
yeah, basically. Poor Jake. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there.
See you, Jake.
I feel bad doing an outro without him. I feel bad doing an outro without him. He's number 4. Thanks, number 4.
He's given up.
Yeah. Thanks, number 4. I don't know how to get rid of number 4 and just it's just you and I now, Pete.
There you
That's
go.
nice.
There you go.
That's nice.
How do we high five? High five this way, right? Like
I don't know, this is how the outro goes. All right. I feel like I'm cheating on Jake. This is how it goes.
His computer died, apparently.
Yeah. Do you want to do the outro? You start.
I've got no idea how it goes. You told me.
You don't. You just make it up. You just say thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening, guys. Make sure that you check out The Pouch, the podcast. Available via any good podcast app. Get it on your phone, get it in your ears, and level up your knowledge about Aussie politics. Get it up, yeah.
I don't know about leveling up your knowledge of Aussie politics. I'm pretty sure our viewership is people who would just want to prove themselves right about being, about the fact that we're wrong about everything. So
I'm looking for some bias, some confirmation bias.
Yeah, look, if you want a steadily growing number of listeners for your podcast, don't run an Australian political podcast. I'll give you the tip. It's good. We do have we've got some wonderfully committed listeners, and I don't want to offend them at all. It is truly great. But obviously the point of our podcast is that we, it's just a debrief, right? Ordinary people who aren't journalists, who have day jobs, who try and stay on top of the news. It's a great excuse to stay on top of the news and to be able to verbalize this stuff. Like.
You just got to get a little more vindictive with a little bit more comedy in there and just go the Friendly Geordies route. Get a big audience that way.
See, Friendly Geordies, man. I try and keep up with him. He's so chaotic. Like, it's so chaotic and so intense.
Switches topics, yeah.
And he's got his own private channel too, which is like a self-help one. And anyway, let's just say that in that channel, he prefaces a lot of things by saying, "Now, I don't have any evidence to back this up." Right?
Here's what I reckon.
Yeah. But anyway, All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Pete. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm sure Jake is somewhere in the ether. Apparently, being in the middle is no good, and here he is.
Looks like it. He's back.
And now, Jake, when people have finished figuring out their own internet speeds,
No, I'm in the middle again.
what,
God damn it.
what would you like them
No!
to do? We better do it again. Yes, look, thank you so much for listening. And Jake, when people have finished figuring out which one's Pete, which one's Greg, and which one's Jake, what would you like them to do?
Go to patreon.com/the pouch, the podcast. And consider subscribing to the show, even.
Subscribe to the Scrode.
And if you're not ready for that level of intimacy, because there's so much intimacy there, but if you're not ready for that level of intimacy, that's fine. Why not go to your podcast listening application of choice and rate us favorably? Because, it helps us to be found by people and makes us feel all warm and fuzzy.
Absolutely, Jake. And if you want to share the love, you can do so by heading to thepouchofthepodcast.com, where you can choose your favorite podcast player of choice. Pete, Jake, thanks for joining me on this Friday night. It's real.
My pleasure.
So
Thanks for
real.
putting up with
Sure
me.
is.
So real. God, I love the internet in Australia. Isn't it the best?
Yeah, it's the
My
best to
issue
be the
wasn't
worst.
the internet.
What was it?
My computer
Battery
froze
power.
completely.
Did it?
No, just randomly froze.
Marked it.
Oh,
Just
well.
randomly died. Good old Apple.
We can't blame the government for that, though. So that doesn't work.
I don't know. They could subsidize Apple more. That'd be great. Well, I'll get a new Mac.
All right. Thank you so much, gents. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, hey? Take it easy.
You too.
Take it easy.
Peace.